Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
49er faithful, we've got an absolutely wild update today, and it comes wrapped around one of the strangest storylines I have ever personally covered in this league. We're talking about a scenario where San Francisco might not just get to walk away from a broken relationship, they might actually get paid to do it. And on top of that, there's a genuinely fascinating blockbuster trade idea floating around involving a familiar face many of you know very well from a division rival. Grab a seat, because today's update has layers. Let's start with the update that honestly still doesn't feel real every time I say it out loud. According to respected 49ers insider Matt Maiocco, San Francisco currently has what he described as an incredible opening to go after money they've already paid Brandon Aiyuk. Now, Maiocco was careful to note he doesn't know the exact final number, but he estimated it could land somewhere between $13.8 million and $18.4 million. Sit with that figure for a second, faithful. We're not talking about a team simply being relieved to move on from a broken relationship. We're talking about a real, legitimate scenario where the 49ers could end up clawing back tens of millions of dollars they already handed to Aiyuk, all because of how he's chosen to handle his own situation over these past several months. I genuinely cannot remember another instance of watching a football team end up in a position to recoup guaranteed money after already paying it out, specifically because the player in question failed to hold up his own end of the bargain. It's an almost unheard-of scenario in professional sports, and yet here we are, watching it play out in real time with a player who, not that long ago, looked like a foundational piece of this franchise's offensive future, and it somehow gets even stranger from there. Word going around is that Aiyuk has essentially already decided what happens the moment the 49ers actually release him. According to reporting on this exact scenario, he'll be signing with the Washington Commanders the very next day. Think about the confidence, or maybe the sheer disregard for how these negotiations typically work, required to essentially announce your next destination before your current team has even let you go. Is he simply speculating because his close friend Jaden Daniels happens to be the franchise quarterback in Washington? Maybe. But it's honestly not out of the realm of possibility at this point to wonder whether Brandon Aiyuk has already played his final snap in the National Football League entirely. That's a heavy, sobering thought about a player with this much talent, but based on everything we've watched unfold, it's a genuinely fair question to be asking right now. Here's a detail that adds an entirely new layer to this whole saga, and it comes from further reporting on that same Maiocco conversation. Apparently, there were people inside the organization, going all the way back 2 years ago during his original contract negotiation, who privately wondered whether Brandon Aiyuk simply didn't want to play football anymore. The story goes that San Francisco had extended him an offer at one point, and Aiyuk just sat on it, never really getting back to the team in a timely way, and that the relationship genuinely felt fractured from that exact moment forward, with the front office left completely unsure about where his head was at or how much urgency he actually felt about getting a deal finalized. Now, for context, that entire contract saga unfolded during a specific stretch of that offseason when the wide receiver market around the league was resetting itself every couple of weeks, with new mega deals landing seemingly every few days and shifting the entire market's expectations in real time. It's entirely plausible that watching that wave of contracts unfold left Aiyuk feeling like he deserved more, and that frustration bled into how he handled those original negotiations. But layer that detail on top of everything we've seen from him this specific summer, and a genuinely uncomfortable pattern starts to emerge. One that suggests this isn't purely about a contract dispute or a desire to be traded. There's a real, credible thread of speculation running through respected 49ers media circles right now, wondering whether Aiyuk's heart is even still in playing football at all, whether some of this public behavior is less about football and more about building a following and a personal brand outside the sport entirely. I won't pretend to know the answer to that question. Nobody outside his inner circle truly does. But it's a theory that's gaining real traction among people who have covered this organization closely for a long time, and it's worth sitting with. Meanwhile, on the other side of this entire situation, the conversation happening among Commanders fans has apparently gotten stranger by the day, too. With a growing number of them starting to come around to Aiyuk's side of things, defending him without necessarily having the full context of everything this organization has actually witnessed over the past several years. That's a genuinely fascinating dynamic to watch unfold from the outside, a fan base essentially adopting a player's sight unseen based purely on the version of the story he's chosen to tell on his own platforms. All right, now let's shift into something a little more fun, because there's a genuinely interesting hypothetical trade scenario worth breaking down. One that involves both Brandon Aiyuk and Mac Jones heading out the door in the very same move. This particular idea comes from Bleacher Report, and it's a 3-team proposal, so bear with me while I lay out all the moving pieces. Here's how it would work. San Francisco sends Brandon Aiyuk to the Pittsburgh Steelers. San Francisco also sends Mac Jones to the New York Jets. In return, San Francisco receives star wide receiver DK Metcalf from Pittsburgh, while the Jets kick in a 3rd-round pick to the Steelers as part of the broader package to help facilitate the whole thing. It's a genuinely creative bit of trade architecture, and the logic behind it actually makes some sense once you break down each piece individually. The Mac Jones half of this deal is built around a real, credible premise. There's been reporting suggesting San Francisco could become open to moving Jones if their own developmental rookie quarterback, Curtis Rourke, shows enough promise this summer to feel like a viable long-term backup option behind Brock Purdy. And the Jets, as we all know, are in what feels like a perpetual, never-ending search for any kind of quarterback stability. A team like that should have real, genuine interest in taking a flyer on a proven veteran like Jones, especially given how well he performed as a spot starter last season. In this specific hypothetical, the Jets actually enlist Pittsburgh's help to make the Jones acquisition happen, with the Steelers sending Metcalf to San Francisco while collecting draft compensation from New York as their fee for helping broker the deal, all while simultaneously taking Brandon Aiyuk off San Francisco's hands in the process. Now here's where I have to be honest with you, faithful, because this is exactly the kind of scenario built for a real conversation. Would you actually want this trade? Let's start with the easy part, losing Brandon Aiyuk in this scenario. I think most of the faithful would move on from that pretty quickly at this point, given everything we've already covered today. That part of this hypothetical trade is genuinely not a tough sell for most fans watching this saga unfold. But Mac Jones is a completely different conversation. Yes, he's technically a backup quarterback, but he's proven himself to be a legitimately high-value backup, arguably one of the best in this entire league, given how he performed last season when Brock Purdy went down with injury, if Purdy ever misses time again this upcoming season. And given his own injury history, that's always a real possibility worth planning around. Having a proven, capable veteran like Jones ready to step in immediately is an enormous luxury most franchises simply don't have. So the real question becomes, would you actually be willing to give that up in exchange for DK Metcalf? Here's my honest, genuine skepticism about this entire idea, and I want to walk you through exactly why. The national conversation around this roster seems to assume San Francisco is still somehow light at wide receiver, and frankly, that premise doesn't hold up under any real scrutiny. This offense already added Mike Evans this offseason. It already added Christian Kirk. It's already got Ricky Pearsall developing, Jacob Cowing developing, a rookie class bringing even more young talent into the room. That is already a genuinely crowded, talented receiver group. So bringing in a player like Metcalf raises an immediate, obvious question. Who exactly are you removing from that room to make space for him? Are you sending a young, cost-controlled developmental talent packing to clear a roster spot? Because if the answer is yes, that's a real cost buried inside this trade that goes well beyond simply giving up Mac Jones. And there's also the financial reality to consider here, faithful, because contracts matter enormously in these hypotheticals. DK Metcalf currently carries a significant long-term financial commitment on his deal. Reports around the league have suggested San Francisco's actual functional cap space, once you account for money that needs to roll over into future seasons, isn't nearly as flexible as some outside analysts seem to assume when they float ideas like this one. Taking on a contract of that size isn't simply a matter of having some open cap room sitting around. It's a genuine long-term financial commitment that has real ripple effects on every other roster decision down the line. There's also a simpler, more instinctive argument against this idea, one that has nothing to do with numbers at all. It's genuinely hard to picture DK Metcalf wearing anything other than the uniform of the team most of us associate him with for the majority of his career. That's obviously more of an emotional gut reaction than a football argument, but sports fandom has always carried an emotional component to it, and watching a player who spent years torching your own secondary suddenly show up in your own locker room takes real time to adjust to, even when the football logic behind the move might check out. That said, I will admit there's one genuinely entertaining silver lining buried inside this entire hypothetical. Picture Metcalf and Diamador Lenoir going head-to-head in training camp practices all summer long. That specific matchup alone would be must-watch content, the kind of high-intensity competitive rep that makes camp genuinely exciting to follow even outside of live game action. If nothing else, that specific detail makes the whole idea at least fun to daydream about, even if the broader trade logistics remain genuinely shaky. So where does that leave us on this hypothetical, faithful? My honest read is that I'd be willing to consider moving on from Mac Jones in the right scenario, one that brings back a genuinely complementary piece this roster actually needs, rather than simply stacking more depth onto an already crowded position group. But specifically giving him up for DK Metcalf, given the state of this current receiver room and the financial commitment attached to his contract, that particular piece of this trade doesn't move the needle for me personally. It's not a question of whether Metcalf is a good player. He clearly is, even if his numbers dipped a bit last season. It's a question of whether this specific team, at this specific moment, actually needs him given everything already sitting on this roster. All right, faithful, that's the update for today, and I know this one is going to generate some real debate. Down in the comments, I want your honest read on both of these stories. First, do you genuinely believe Brandon Aiyuk has already played his last snap in the NFL? And do you buy into the theory that this was never really about football at all? And second, on this hypothetical three-way trade, would you actually pull the trigger on sending away Mac Jones and Brandon Aiyuk in exchange for DK Metcalf? Or does this entire idea fall apart once you actually think through the roster logistics and the money involved? Drop your honest, unfiltered takes below, because I promise you I read every single one of them. And I have a feeling today's comment section is going to be a genuinely lively one. If today's update gave you something real to think about, please do me a favor and smash that like button, because it genuinely helps this channel grow and reach even more of the faithful who need to see exactly what's happening behind the scenes in Santa Clara. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we are covering every single twist and turn coming out of this organization all summer long. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I will see you in the very next video. Go Niners!